Welcome to another deep dive, folks. This time we're getting our hands dirty with the fascinating world of soil, specifically the soil food web, that network of
Mhm.
life that's so crucial for healthy soil.
Mm.
We're going to be using some awesome material from the SFI, the Soil Food Web Institute, who've been doing this work since way back in 1986. So by the end of this deep dive, you'll be able to move past all the quick fix solutions out there and really understand how to make your soil thrive.
It's pretty wild, right? How much focus we put on what's happening above ground while this whole crazy metropolis of life is going on beneath our feet.
Totally. It's
Wow.
easy to just see dirt. But SFI, they paint a picture of billions of microorganisms, of just all these bacteria and fungi and protozoa and nematodes,
Yeah.
all interacting in this crazy complex system that we call soil.
Yeah. It's mind-boggling. And the thing is, all these organisms, they all have their own specific jobs.
Yeah.
They're all connected in this delicate balance. So like bacteria, for example, they're like tiny recycling machines breaking down organic matter and releasing nutrients that plants can actually use.
So it's like a microscopic city. Everyone has a job to do down there. It makes you think about how much we've messed with that natural balance.
Yeah.
With all of the chemicals we use in modern agriculture, SFI actually compares it to like a drug addiction, which is a pretty powerful image.
Yeah, it is a strong comparison. And, unfortunately, in a lot of cases, it's pretty accurate. The more we rely on chemical pesticides and fertilizers, the more damage we do to this intricate web of life in the soil. And that weakens the soil's ability to actually support plants. So we end up needing more and more chemical intervention to keep things going.
Yeah, we're creating a system of dependency
Yeah.
instead of working with the natural systems that are already there. But SFI, they specialize in what they call soil rehabilitation,
Hmm.
which I think is so cool. It's like they're soil therapists,
Yeah.
helping growers get off this chemical treadmill. What does that actually look like in practice, though?
Well, a big part of it is understanding that a healthy soil food web can drastically reduce the need for those external inputs, the fertilizers and pesticides.
Wait, so you're saying by focusing on the health of the soil, you actually need to use fewer products overall? That sounds like a dream come true.
It's not magic. It really comes down to the science of how
Right.
these organisms work. Think about it. A healthy food web creates the system where nutrients are stored and cycled super efficiently. The organisms, they hold on to nutrients so they don't just leach away, and then they release them in forms that plants can easily absorb.
It's like a built-in slow-release fertilizer system,
Yeah.
but powered by nature.
Yeah.
And I remember SFI was talking about how these organisms actually improve soil structure too. They create better conditions for roots to grow and for water to get in.
Absolutely. Those tiny creatures, they're responsible for making all those air and water channels, which are essential for good root development and water retention. And it gets even better. The beneficial organisms in a thriving food web can actually outcompete the harmful ones, which naturally reduces the need for pesticides.
Hold on. So you're telling me that by building a healthy soil food web,
Mm,
we could have healthier plants, use fewer chemicals, and save water?
you got it. It's a win-win-win for the grower, the environment, and the plants themselves.
Okay, I'm convinced. But how do we actually get started with all this?
Mhm.
How do we build and support this amazing invisible world?
Well, that's where things get really exciting. One of the most powerful tools for regenerating soil, something we're all familiar with, compost. But SFI, they don't see compost as just fertilizer. They see it as a concentrated dose of life for the soil.
So it's not just about adding nutrients, it's about adding the life that makes those nutrients available to the plants.
Exactly. Compost introduces a whole range of beneficial organisms, feeds the existing soil life, and improves soil structure. It's a multi-pronged approach to revitalizing the soil.
So using compost is like giving the soil this boost of beneficial bacteria and fungi and all those other tiny creatures we've been talking about. And speaking of boosts, I've heard about this thing called compost tea. What is that exactly? And how is it different from just using regular compost?
Compost tea. Well, it takes the benefits of compost to a whole new level. Imagine it like a concentrated liquid extract, brewed in a way that multiplies all those beneficial organisms and makes the nutrients readily soluble. You can apply it to both the soil and the leaves, giving the plants this powerful dose of good microbes and readily available nutrients.
Okay, that sounds pretty intriguing, like a supercharged version of compost.
It is. But it's important to remember that not all compost teas are created equal. It's really important to understand the difference between true compost tea, compost extract, and leachate. They all have different qualities and benefits.
Ah, so there's more to it than just soaking some compost in water. What are the key differences between these three?
Well, true compost tea involves this specific brewing process, where we carefully encourage the growth of beneficial aerobic bacteria and fungi. This creates a highly concentrated solution. teeming with beneficial life. Compost extract, on the other hand, is just a water extract of compost without that focused brewing step.
So it's less potent than tea, but still potentially beneficial.
Exactly. Now, leachate, that's basically the liquid that drains from a compost pile. It's mostly soluble nutrients with very little microbial life. So while each of them has its place, true compost tea is really the powerhouse when it comes to introducing those beneficial organisms and their advantages.
I'm starting to see why SFI is so big on compost tea. It's not just a simple drink, but a carefully brewed elixir that harnesses the power of those microbes. But I am curious, what are the specific advantages of using compost tea over other methods?
Compost tea offers several key benefits. First, it introduces beneficial organisms to both the leaves and the soil, creating this protective barrier against diseases. Second, it provides readily available soluble nutrients to really boost plant growth. And finally, it can significantly reduce the need for chemical inputs, helping us move towards a more sustainable approach to growing.
So compost tea sounds like a total game changer for sustainable gardening. But I imagine there's a bit of a learning curve when it comes to brewing it correctly.
There are definitely some nuances to the process, but it's not as complicated as you might think. The most important thing is maintaining those aerobic conditions we talked about earlier. We want to create an environment where the good guys thrive, not the harmful anaerobic ones.
So making sure there's plenty of oxygen throughout the brewing process is key. What else should we know about brewing and using compost tea effectively?
Another important factor is that high-quality compost tea has a pretty short shelf life. Those beneficial organisms are most active and effective when the tea is fresh.
So it's kind of like fresh baked bread, best enjoyed right away.
Exactly. To make it last a little longer, you need to aerate it, agitate it, and even add some extra food to keep those microbes happy and thriving.
Wow, I'm already seeing compost tea in a whole new light. It's not just a simple concoction, but a vibrant living solution that requires some careful brewing and timely application. Sounds like we've got a lot more to unpack when it comes to the details of compost tea. But before we dive into all that, let's zoom in on the amazing diversity of the soil food web itself. I'm dying to learn more about all those fascinating creatures who are working tirelessly beneath our feet.
Absolutely. Each organism has this unique role to play in this intricate web of life. Understanding their individual functions and relationships can really deepen our appreciation for the complexity and wonder of the soil ecosystem.
Yeah, it really is amazing to think about this whole unseen world, just bustling with activity under our feet. We've talked about some of the key players like bacteria and fungi, but we're ready to dig a little deeper and really get to know each of these organisms. Where should we start?
Well, bacteria are always a good place to begin. They're like the ultimate decomposers, right? Breaking down organic matter and releasing nutrients back into the soil. They're also responsible for a lot of the nutrient transformations that make those nutrients available to plants in the first place.
So they're like the essential workers, keeping the whole system running. What about fungi? They always seem to get a lot of attention when we talk about soil health. What makes them so special?
Fungi are crucial for building soil structure. They form these long thread-like structures called hyphae, which act like tiny highways, transporting water and nutrients throughout the soil. They also play a vital role in decomposing the more complex organic matter, like those woody materials that bacteria have a harder time with.
So they're like the engineers and architects of the soil, creating pathways and breaking down the tough stuff. I remember SFI mentioned a specific type of fungi called mycorrhizal fungi. And they said these guys have a special relationship with plants.
Right. Mycorrhizal fungi form a symbiotic partnership with plant roots. They actually extend the reach of the roots, helping them access water and nutrients that they wouldn't be able to reach on their own. And in return, the plants provide the fungi with sugars that they make through photosynthesis. It's a win-win situation.
It's amazing how these microscopic organisms have evolved to work together like that. So beneficial for both of them. We've talked a lot about bacteria and fungi, but what about protozoa and nematodes? Those sound a little more intimidating, to be honest. What are their roles in the soil food web? They
might sound a little scary, but protozoa and nematodes are actually really important for keeping the soil food web in balance. They're predators, They feed on other organisms and help to regulate their populations.
So they're like the quality control team, making sure no one gets out of hand.
Exactly. Or, for example, protozoa mainly feed on bacteria, which might seem counterintuitive, but when they consume bacteria, they release excess nutrients that the bacteria were holding on to, making those nutrients available to plants.
Wow, so even the act of predation actually contributes to the overall health of the system. Fascinating. And what about nematodes? What are they munching on down there?
Nematodes have diverse appetites. Some feed on fungi, others on bacteria, and some even prey on other nematodes. This whole complex web of predator-prey relationships helps to keep populations in check and contributes to the cycling of nutrients throughout the soil.
It really is a beautifully orchestrated system.
Mm.
But we've also talked about how human actions can throw things off balance.
Yeah.
We already mentioned the impacts of chemical pesticides and fertilizers.
Mm-hmm.
Are there other practices that can harm the soil food web?
Yeah, definitely. Tilling or plowing the soil is a common practice that can actually do more harm than good. I mean, it might seem like a good way to prepare the soil for planting, but tilling disrupts the soil structure, breaks up those fungal networks we talked about,
Yep.
and exposes soil organisms to harsh conditions.
So it's like we're destroying the infrastructure of the soil.
Exactly. It sets back the progress of building that healthy, balanced ecosystem. Another damaging practice is leaving the soil bare without any plant cover.
Yeah, I can see how that would be a problem. Bare soil is vulnerable to erosion, and without plants, there's no living root system to support the soil food web.
Exactly. Keeping the soil covered,
Right.
whether with cover crops or just a mix of vegetation, is essential for protecting and feeding those soil organisms. Cover crops in particular are amazing for the soil. They prevent erosion and add organic matter and provide a habitat for beneficial organisms.
So cover crops are like a multi-purpose tool for soil health. This is all so interesting. But I'm wondering, what are some practical things we can do to promote a healthy soil food web in our own gardens and yards, even our houseplants?
That's a great question, and that's where the knowledge and practices of the Soil Food Web Institute really come in handy. They have tons of information and resources to help us understand how to nurture this unseen world beneath our feet.
Okay, I am so ready to get my hands dirty. We've learned so much about the soil food web, but now I want to know, how do we actually apply this knowledge? What are some things we can do to start nurturing these unseen allies in our own backyards?
Yeah, that's the perfect next step. And remember, it all starts with a shift in perspective. We need to stop thinking of soil as just this inert stuff and start seeing it as this living, breathing ecosystem full of beneficial life.
It's about working with nature, not against it.
Mm-hmm.
So where do we even begin? We've talked a lot about compost as a key ingredient for soil regeneration.
Yeah.
What are some practical tips for using compost effectively?
Well, first off, not all compost is created equal. You want to look for compost that's rich in a diversity of organisms, not just bacteria. Aim for a good balance of bacteria and of fungi, and make sure it's been properly composted so you don't introduce any pathogens.
Okay, so finding good quality compost is step one. What about actually applying it? Do we just sprinkle it on top like some magical fairy dust?
Yeah. You can top dress with it, but for even better results, it's best to incorporate the compost into the soil itself. You can do that through sheet mulching, where you layer compost with other organic materials, like wood chips or straw, or just mix it into the top few inches of soil.
Get that compost goodness down where the roots can reach it.
Exactly. And remember, the goal here is to build up that soil food web, not just feed the plants directly. Think of compost as a long-term investment in your soil's health.
Gotcha. We've also talked about compost tea and how it can amplify the benefits of compost. So I'm really curious to learn more about brewing it. Is it as complicated as it sounds?
It might seem daunting at first, but brewing compost tea is actually pretty simple. The most important thing is creating those aerobic conditions we discussed, making sure there's plenty of oxygen throughout the brewing process.
Great, lots of bubbling and airflow.
Yeah.
What of the recipe? Is there a standard formula for compost tea?
There are some general guidelines, but one of the cool things about compost tea is that you can actually tailor the recipe to what your plants need. You can add things like kelp, fish hydrolysate, or worm castings to boost certain types of organisms.
So it's like creating a custom blend for your soil.
Exactly. And as you get more comfortable with the process, you can experiment with different brewing times, aeration techniques, and ingredients to see what works best in your garden.
There's a whole world of possibilities inside that compost tea brewer.
There really is. And once you've brewed your tea, applying it is super easy. You just spray it on the soil and the leaves. Those beneficial organisms will quickly get to work, forming a protective barrier and improving nutrient uptake.
Like giving our plants a probiotic boost. Awesome. So we've talked about compost tea, minimizing tilling and keeping the soil covered. Are there any other practices that can help?
Absolutely. Choosing the right plants for your soil is huge. Planting a diverse mix of species, including things like legumes, can really make a difference.
It all comes back to working with nature, not against it. We're not just managing plants, but a whole ecosystem.
You got it. And as you nurture that soil food web, you'll really start to see the rewards. Healthier plants, less need for chemicals, greater resilience to pests and diseases. It's incredible what a thriving soil ecosystem can do.
It's like creating this self-sustaining oasis of life, starting from the tiniest organisms.
I love that analogy. And don't forget, the Soil Food Web Institute is a phenomenal resource for anyone who wants to learn more. They offer workshops, online courses, and a ton of information on their website to help you become a true soil steward.
Couldn't agree more. It's been an incredible journey exploring this often overlooked world beneath our feet.
Mm.
I'm feeling so inspired to get out there and start nurturing my own soil food web. Thanks so much for guiding us through this deep dive.
My pleasure. It's always exciting to share the wonders of the soil food web and help people become better caretakers of this vital resource.
And to all our listeners out there, keep digging deeper, keep learning, and keep nurturing those unseen allies that make life on Earth possible. Thanks for joining us on the deep dive.